Hi everybody, Achilles Justice here with the Philosophy Society. It's January 3rd, 2024. Happy New Year to everyone. That's a good thing, right? I think humans necessarily get kind of excited with New Year just because we made it another year. You know, we haven't destroyed ourselves or been destroyed by something else. So that's good. Let's celebrate that. That's great, right?
Better than last year.
You know,
The group.
there was a funny meme I read recently that it was these aliens and they were looking at Earth, and then the Earthlings were saying, "Oh, Happy New Year!" And then the aliens were like, "What are they celebrating?" The other alien was like, "They did a circle around their sun." The other alien said, "I told you they're not intelligent." Well, that was funny. It was a thing.
One cycle.
Yeah, I think I saw that. That's pretty good.
Yeah. And in the chat group, I don't know if everyone saw, someone mentioned New Year's resolutions. And I think it's, we could talk about that for a minute. You know, like if New Year's, I'm just gonna kind of repeat what I said, and maybe we can expand on it. If New Year's motivates you to do something for yourself and make a change in your life, that's great, right? Like if it pushes you forward and you grow, that's a beautiful thing, obviously, right? But if you kind of procrastinate from February until December, and then you're like, finally, it's January. Now it's time for me to do something that's good for myself. That's a little, you know, that's not really that functional. It's better whenever you observe something in your life or in yourself that you can make a difference with now and change, then do it now, right? There's no need for you to wait for in some ways, arbitrary date or deadline or someone else giving you the approval to do something, whatever that might be, right? And we really want to be like self-sustaining and our own growth contingent on ourselves, not on external factors. So one thing we could talk about is like locus of control. When shit happens to you, so I'm talking to you guys now. So when we're doing stuff, right? When people are in the room, I kind of talk to people because I can see your facial expressions and I'm engaged with the people. So that's a motivation to come here.
Shame.
So when shit happens to you, you can either blame the environment, it's the cosmos that did it, or you can, the negative way to say is blame yourself, but take responsibility is the positive way, right? And so, you know, people that have an internal locus of control, they can kind of like, the negative side of that would be like catastrophizing or personalizing, right? Like some distortions we talked about in the Feeling Good book. And you can kind of get depressed if you misappropriate what is really in your control and what's not in your control, right? So it's important to, like the Serenity Prayer, you know, I translate it for an agnostic perspective. Cosmos, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? You could plug God in there if you want to, but I didn't. So, you know, it's important to know that. And I think that it kind of comes from, it's used in Alcoholics Anonymous a lot, right? Which is fine. And it's important for us to kind of, the wisdom part is where you draw that boundary, the line between what is in your control, right? What you can do something about. Because some people have the deterministic perspective that you have control over nothing and just give up, let the universe kind of just take you along for a ride and whatever, right? But that's not really the case for us as human beings. Like there's the mouse, you know, the thing, or like a rock, inanimate objects, things that have no volition. They don't move on their own accord. And then there's us. We can make decisions. We can do things, right?
I have a little parable for that, or same concept. You can plug in God, the universe, the cosmos will steer the boat. You just have to row it.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
As long as you're like in motion, as long as you're doing something and you're not just stationary, waiting for it. So you're like moving in a certain direction that you believe is right. And then life will kind of like, opportunities will present themselves and the opposites will also redirect you onto your proper path.
Yeah.
What happened, for example.
Well, I think that decisions, and like there's effort and we can be determined on a specific goal, right? Remember, I don't know if you were there when I talked about like values and then principles and habits.
Yeah.
And then we have goals, right? And we utilize this like combination of Our values are going to kind of determine what our goals are. And if our goals are not in line with our values, that can create dissonance and reduce the amount of meaning we have in life, right? Like you've been talking about this career change. So that's a goal based on some value you have, right? Which could be like well-being or workplace satisfaction, things like that, right? Like, what am I doing with my time?
Yeah.
If you're sitting there and you're like fucking doing something and you're like, this is so shitty, right? And then maybe at the beginning, they're like, here's a bunch of money, here you go. You're like, oh, that's great. And then like, you know what? That person's getting the same amount of money as me. And what they're doing seems way more entertaining than what I'm doing, right?
Or slightly less, but the point is, you know, you have to, it's your values. Like, what do you value the most, right? Like satisfactory work that's like pulling you and you can like progress, or being stuck in a position, let's say like not entry level, but like somewhat entry level, but you're not even interested in progressing further. So even though you may have started with more money, because you're not passionate, you're not pursuing like, your career more, you may start and like you may end up earning less than the person who started off. The base salary was lower, but they kept moving because they're passionate about it.
Very good. Yes, that's super important. So like the thing, like I talk about this too. So the thing is when you have that internal passion, that internal connection with the thing you're doing or the drive, right? You will most likely, so we can talk about intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. An intrinsic reward is when you just do it for yourself, which is akin to that passion. I do it because it feels so good. I just love doing it. Like me doing this, it's an intrinsic reward in a lot of ways. There are some extrinsic things because I know that there are consequences to me doing this. So there's extrinsic rewards, right? But the evidence shows that like when they take kids and they're giving them like a drawing, like here you go, here's a bunch of crayons, drawing. We're going to give you like a chocolate bar or like $1 after you do the drawing. That's an extrinsic reward. Those kids put much less effort into the drawing than the ones that just do it for the sake of drawing itself.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you align your career with that, right, what you're producing will in some ways be of higher quality because you care about it much more than just the money you're getting.
Exactly. It also makes the time fly faster. It's like a lot of perks, you know? Yeah, and also back to the resolution thing. I think sometimes to certain people, January can be a good wake-up call. Because sometimes, especially at the end of the new year, we get so discouraged. And we're still in winter. People still have seasonal depression. People also just need, you know, a little push. And New Year's resolution could be a little push for the people who are hibernating, you know?
That's good.
But January can also be toxic. It can for someone who's been pushing themselves all year, and now all of a sudden everyone's like New Year's resolution. Like for example, like I did like all the, you know, the little habits, like I do them daily. Or most of the time, I do them every single day. Now I'm like, okay, everybody's doing New Year's resolution. I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? I don't think I'm supposed to swear on this, but like I'm like, okay, reading. I'm like, I do it. I'm like this and this. Like, what else am I supposed to? What am I supposed to add? Like applying to jobs? like what? And now you're like, okay, like we live in such a society where, like, I'm not saying I'm a perfect person. Like I'm not, but we have to constantly be improving ourselves. To the point where, like, what if I want a slow start to my year? Now people are going to be like, oh, she's a slacker. I'm like, no, you're the slacker. You've been slacking the past 4 months. Like, where were you? But also, like, gyms. Like, I go to the gym pretty regularly. Gyms are going to be unbearable. I have not been to the gym this year. It's terrifying. And, like, for what? For them to give up again in a month? If we're going to be negative, maybe 2? Yeah, like, thanks. Now I want to not to go to the gym. You know?
For 2 months until you're going to do it for the rest of the year.
Yeah, like like right now there's a bunch of people running. Like when I'm driving like the dogs to the lake, there's like 5 times the amount of people running. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, and the reason is because it's January.
Yeah.
Right?
January 3rd. They haven't even made it past 2 weeks yet.
They got 5 days left.
Yeah, let's see how it goes for 2 weeks. You know, after 2 weeks, like, well, technically it's after 3 weeks, because if they're running after 3 weeks, then, you know, it's a habit. Sounds good. But yeah, well, we got to give them like 20 more days.
So, but you saying that you're going to take a break, right? The resolution could just be that I'm working myself too hard. It's important for me to find a way to have balance in life,
Yeah, like I know, but I'm just saying like it's not like go, go, go. Like mine is gonna be slowing down, which is like to corporate North America. It's like, yeah, my resolution is slowing down. Like, are you okay? Are you dense? Like, okay.
Yeah, so resolution stuff, I think it's important for us to take growth as it comes in and have a different mechanism to address it than just like this time of the year. Because that's what some people have, and that's all they have, then sure, it can break some kind of monotony or whatever. But in some ways, I feel that we need to have some kind of a mechanism that's a daily thing. And recently we were talking about the capacity of the mind to be open, to observe opportunities in our environment. And in our experience, if our social life or other emotional triggers that are going on are stressing us out a lot, then what can happen is we don't have the mental capacity to observe any opportunities in our experience or our environment, and we can't take advantage of it, right? So there may be areas of growth that we can engage in, like resolutions throughout the year, but if our daily life is just so taxing cognitively on us, you're stressed out, as soon as you get home, you just fall asleep. Like when I was a carpenter,
Wow.
Right.
He's trying to offend me. He's trying to offend me right now. I'm just kidding.
when I was a carpenter, I would be so tired, right? Because I'm burning so many calories every day. I would get home just to sleep right away, right? And I wouldn't really have any time to think about anything. You know what I'm saying? So, some people, they may not care. Maybe they have families and their job prospects are relatively limited. So it's okay for them to sacrifice that and sleep, because when they're awake, they don't have the anxiety about like, how am I going to get money? How am I going to afford to do this, stuff, the other thing, right? So that goes back to the values.
Also, the only way they can continue to repeat the cycle of go to work, because if they're awake, they might not be able to deal with their next shift, right?
So our values are fundamentally going to determine, right, what decisions are best for us. And some values, as I talked in 3 or 4 weeks ago, are going to be personal values. They're relative to the specific individual. Whereas other values are going to be kind of universal just for humans in general. And how you can say, well, how can values be universal? Aren't we all different? Don't we have identities?
Well, I don't know. Shall not kill. Maybe that would be like not to kill people. I think that's the value.
Yeah, sure, of course. It's like a moral value.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like the universal way.
Unless like
Don't kill other people.
unless you're like in a situation where another country is invading your country.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna go there. Yeah.
Right? So maybe murder is a better word.
Yeah. Murder. Yes, that's key.
Because murder is the killing of innocence. Whereas in some situations, if you're defending yourself or somebody else who's innocent, and in that defense, the person gets killed, that wouldn't be murder. Yeah, moral values are a little different. I would put them in their own category. They would almost be like principles, moral principles that we uphold in some ways. And then like certain values, like the value for like your family.
I was about to say, yeah. That would be a better thing to say rather than murder. Yeah.
And I'm using value in the sense that like, this is something that's important to me and I will structure my life around it, right? Like it is a priority for myself, and the self is supposed to really be the most important priority. And one confusion that people can find themselves in is when the priority of the self becomes selfishness, meaning that they take advantage of others and manipulate others for their own gain, which is different than doing stuff that's in your self-interest.
Super inflated ego.
Yeah, narcissism.
Narcissism.
We're going like that's that path, right? Or like the psychopathology in a bad way. The best way to deal with this, and this is what we've been talking about before, is to have resolutions almost every day. And not crazy big ones that are grandiose and you can't achieve them, but things that are within micro steps, you'll get to the greater goal. And then before, again in Burns's book, we talked about outcome orientation and process orientation. Right? So we identify a goal that's realistic and achievable, like becoming an architect, right? And if you said, I'm going to become an architect next year, it's like, wow, really? Okay.
Crash course.
How effective is it? And is it achievable? And in that context, it wouldn't be, right?
What do you mean? I can take 10 courses a semester. I just don't need to.
Yeah, right. So, but that's there you go. So that if someone does that, then it's going to be a huge strain on their daily life. And so the decision, because it's like you're in your present state, and then a decision will change your state to a different state, right? So we have to be mindful of our decisions, because that's almost like a portal to a new world. When we make decisions, goes back to what you said initially, is putting effort in and let the cosmos kind of steer the boat. That's a very deterministic perspective on the universe, which in the contrast would be like a free will contrast or agency. And so there may be some things, maybe it's not one or the other. Maybe there's some things that, and that's why I talked about the serenity prayer, that are not in our control, that are deterministic, that we can't change. But then there's other things we can change. And our decision-making capacity is that mechanism of change in some ways.
So it's like a paradox in a way. It can be like one and the other at the same time. Deterministic and also free will.
Yeah, I would say some things are out of our maybe the way that they make that it's a false dichotomy. They say it's one or the other as a critical thinking fallacy. Maybe it's not one or the other. Maybe it's a little bit different, right? Maybe like I said, there are things that are in our control, but then there's things that are not in our control. And so what we can do is we can learn to use our intelligence and our awareness to be mindful of that which affects us, and then take action on the things that we can do something about. Now, there's like direct action. There's things you're doing in the moment, but then there could be indirect action, like the development of a habit, or like in 10 days from now, like for you, you've been under some stress recently, you've been dealing with some shit, right? And it's like, today I can't do this. I just can't do it today. But if I do these things that I can do today, and then tomorrow I can do A, B, C, D, the next day I can do E, F, G, then 5 days from now, I can do this thing that I really want right now, but it can't happen right now. So I'm preparing myself. So it's an indirect move.
And it's small little blocks. Like you're just building it by small little blocks instead of like sabotaging the whole thing too.
Yeah. Because what happens is some people, like when we look at being passive or procrastination, or people that are in states of depression, they can become overwhelmed. They're like, I want this goal now, right? And there's no direct link to it. And so it seems unachievable, so they don't even do anything, right? Like there's many people that want to change their career or develop their career, but they don't even do it at all. And they always talk about it, and you're like, why do you keep on saying the same shit? Like, why aren't you doing something?
It's also scientifically proven that the more you talk about something, the less likely you're going to do it, because you get the validation first thing you do.
Really?
A lot of people get like that when they talk about their weight loss plan,
Okay.
or any other plans. Like if I keep talking about it and I don't do it, hopefully it's like the case. Yeah, it's like it gives you that satisfaction. It's like apparently your brain registers you talking about it like you're already doing it. And so a lot of people just get that enjoyment without doing anything.
So it's satisfied without even doing it.
It's a validation. Yeah.
I know of research where when we make commitments to others, it actually increases our likelihood to do it, because now all these people will be like, well, didn't you do that thing? And you don't want to like disappoint them.
Yeah, but that's a commitment. You guys are doing it together. I mean, it depends on the commitment. Like obviously, you know, if you promise your husband you're going to wait, you know, you kind of feel more committed to it. But if, for example, like I'm just saying like, yeah, like I'm gonna quit cigarettes this year, for example, right? Mm-hmm. And then you already feel like you quit cigarettes. Pretty much.
That's interesting. I think we could look into that. That's interesting. Because on one hand, there's the social support factor, and there's how that influences our motivation, really. Right?
That is true. That is true. I mean, I guess it also depends maybe on like, have you started doing something towards that? Like if you're just talking, you haven't even thought about doing it. You haven't even thought about the steps or the little steps or having any plot, like line at all. And also it takes time to develop things. Like, you know, it takes like, now, like, you know, you can say like, once you've already accomplished something, it seems so easy for you to talk about accomplish that, because hey, you already did all the work. Technically speaking, you can accomplish anything as well by hard work, right? But we're not talking about like super high positions, because you know there's glass ceiling, there's nepotism. We're not getting into that.
Sure.
But at this point, it's like, why is anybody quit, right? Like, why? You can just work. Like, you can put in work and just do that. We know that that's not the case, right? So, okay, that's just going into
okay.
different
That's a can.
temporary realm.
We can crack that can. That's fine.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like if someone has never even thought about doing it and one like may not have the perfect environment, the only thing that people have with privilege and money is a lot of things simplify. Like for example, like if you are broke, eating healthy may be difficult for you because you don't have the time, you don't have the money, you don't have the energy to be eating a healthy meal, right? If you're counting every cent of what you're eating, you're not gonna be like, I want macros, I need my protein intake. Like, no, you're gonna eat that fucking bread and you're gonna be like, yeah, I get to eat today, right?
Sure.
Meanwhile, like let's say if you're not counting anything, you can just grab yourself a salad, God knows what's the price tag on that, and get all the micronutrients you need. And we all know that weight loss, it's pretty much nutrition, and exercise a little bit, right? So yeah, if a person is like even working their ass off and starving themselves, and when they are eating, they're eating garbage, they may be putting in so much effort, they may be like mentally struggling because they're not eating and then they're binging or whatever, right? Meanwhile, this person's not putting in any effort, they're just eating healthy because they can. And that's it, right?
So I think you're identifying a bunch of important properties here.
Yeah.
Right? So like the goal, we could just say is like health. And there's many reasons why health is important. And so that's so it's a value, it's intrinsic, and you could say it's also extrinsic because there's factors that we gain from it in itself. So it feels good to be healthy, and there's benefits of being healthy.
For sure.
Right? I think it's important when we say health to distinguish, do you mean as a goal or do you mean as just a value, right? Because there are things we can do to fulfill the value or reach the goal, right? And then we would say, well, how are we going to define what healthiness is? And then we need to have an evaluation mechanism so you identified diet and exercise as two means to get to that goal, right? Or to satisfy the value. And so for diet, or nutrition, because diet can have almost a negative connotation too.
Oh yeah.
Right? But if I a lot of the times the terms we use, if they're negatively emotionally loaded, it can just be hard to even think about the word because it has negative emotional content to it. So when I say the word, I'm like, it make me feel good.
So how do we separate that?
You would translate it for a different word. So you swap it out.
I mean, it's the same thing, like, for example, like a healthy diet, right? Like, if you've been eating junk food all your life, there's no way you're going to look at a salad and be like, yeah, I want that. No, absolutely not. You have to, reword it and, realize that you're not eating it to, let's say, lose weight or anything. You're eating it to benefit yourself.
Very good, exactly.
Exactly, right?
It's a reward instead of a punishment.
Yeah.
Right? So when we look at how we train animals, like dogs and stuff, positive reinforcement is a way more effective mechanism than punishment, right? Because the punishment can be ambiguous to the dog. And we're our own animals anyways, right? And so for us to associate what the mechanism is that we want ourselves to learn, if we utilize reinforcement, positive reinforcement, it's way easier for our brains to connect the idea, right? So if I say, my stomach feels a little weird, I can't wait to eat that salad so it can help me digest and it'll make me feel light inside. Oh, I really look forward to that feeling. That's a reward, right? Whereas if I say, I'm not allowed to eat X, I'm punishing myself, right? And I'm trying to force myself to resist something. And so earlier you said, don't even make the mistake in the first place, right? That's similar to negative emotions. Is you could talk about anger and you could be angry and then you're trying to pull the horse back. You're like, whoa, you're a little too much energy right there, right? That's difficult. The horse is stronger than you. What would be best is to not piss the horse off in the first place, right? So what that means is don't desire the thing that you know is going to have negative consequences. So how do you do that? Well, what are the factors that are leading me to desire the thing, right? If it's something that's bad for me, Like it could be a negative relationship, right? So you talked about, okay, if the person's not, if they're stressed out, stress could be one factor for diet, but then also it could be that they're very busy, right? And a lot of people, they get overwhelmed with work and, they forget about eating, and then their insulin goes down, and then they need to have like glucose because their brain's just fucking destroyed. Like when I was a carpenter, I would just, sometimes they're like, you just got to keep on going. You got to get shit done right now, right? And maybe I was so tired that before I didn't really wake up on time. So I would not eat breakfast. And I wouldn't maybe eat until like 3 or some shit. Fuck. Right? And so the first opportunity I get to eat something, it's like I'm not really making a decision. I'm just taking the first thing that I can get that has like the highest calories possible. Why? Because my body is just starving for energy. Right? So now you're like, I need to, so I've observed the situation. I've done some kind of analysis, right? And I see how things are, the flow of things here. What do I do? How do I change this? Remember we said earlier, big changes are difficult. If I have this goal that's way up here, if I'm trying to struggle with this goal, it's going to be challenging. So what's the smallest increment of change in the direction of the goal? What's the baby step?
So 1%, as they say.
Sure.
Every day, 1%.
Yeah.
The goal.
Instead of 50, 1 is good, or just whatever an increment would be that's towards that, right?
And this one book, actually, Atomic Habits, I'm sure you guys read it, where it's like split your habits into 2 minutes. Like just have a habit for 2 minutes and just keep on doing the same habit, even for 2 minutes every day until you internalize the concept and actually showing up for it, and then slowly you can for it on the.
And the key is like if you start something, you might end up doing it for maybe in 2 minutes.
Very good.
This is the hardest part is usually to start.
So one thing that I started doing is I would bring protein bars to work, and I could nibble on the protein bar throughout the shift, and then I would be getting a little bit of energy as I go, and I wouldn't be starving myself for many hours and then just taking whatever I could get. Second thing is so that's one methodology, right? Second methodology was I would in advance plan out which food I could have when I was not hungry, when my brain was working fine and I wasn't tired, I wasn't in that extreme state. I'd be like, these are my options. So it's almost like if you're running in the dark and you're like falling off a cliff and you need to grab onto something. If you're just aimlessly grabbing whatever, you could grab a shitty root and it's not going to hold your weight. But if you looked and said, where is the strongest branch? Then you could run in that direction blind. Whenever you go off the cliff, you know if I put my arm in this direction, I'll grab the branch that will support me.
But it's also your planning. And I think planning is really important. So like it just decreases your chances of self-sabotage. And yeah, it helps with the decision making even when you're not a conscious.
Yeah. And so when I said earlier, we were talking about agency in the moment and then determinism, you can premeditate certain decisions for the future so that when you're in the moment in the future, you already have set up a cognitive apparatus, like neurologically, so that it's easier for you in the moment to take the best decision for you. And again, when we look at wisdom, philosophy society, and we talk about wisdom in some ways comes down to how we make our decisions. So what does that really mean? Right? Well, what you can do is in planning, use the word, we can visualize executing those plans. I can be like, okay, I'm going to go here. So for example, the carpenter situation, there was a Sobeys near the place where I was working. And I would always go there and I would buy the hot cooked meal. I would get a piece of chicken, some potatoes, and I would buy a salad. And I would visualize it first. And then I started doing that every day. And it became a habit. So it was super easy. Once it's a habit, it's automatic. There's little effort that goes into doing it, right? But initially, the challenging part was to shift, especially in a new environment. If you're in a new environment, you don't know where that branch is. You're kind of walking in the dark. And if your willpower goes down because of high cortisol, you have lots of stress in your life in this moment, or whatever, you're tired, it's going to be very difficult to make a constructive decision for yourself, whatever that might be. So this comes down to like, how do I not wait until the end of the year for a resolution? How can I make changes in my life every day that are good for me? Because again, it's a time thing. The one thing humans have the least of really is time. If you have infinite time, you can have everything, right? You could go through all the permutations of everything, and you could figure out every problem that we have. Because the cosmos is space and time. It's those two fundamental things, and within that, everything else occurs: light, gravity, right? Matter. And so the kinds of beings that we are tied to time. How we manage it, being wise with our time, comes down to being aware of different states that we find ourselves in and learning to navigate those states. Sometimes it's effort, but we just don't want to be spinning our wheels, right? Like the hamster's putting a lot of effort in, it's going nowhere. And so you want to make sure that wherever you are going, you're going in the right place, that the goal is realistic, whatever that goal might be. We can do, like Nietzsche says, a revaluation of values. Is the priority of my values sound? Like like some people in my life, they really like getting drunk. It's like, they just like getting, like not just having a drink, but like getting drunk. And if that's a skill that you're practicing, right, you're going to get better at it. You're going to increase your tolerance to a certain point where it can easily kill you and you develop an addiction and now you're an alcoholic. That value of being drunk is a problem.
I don't think anyone drinks to become, better drinker. I mean, like maybe some college kids, but usually I feel like alcoholics are usually escaping something. I don't think everyone's like, I'm gonna be a champion. Or like, like at some point it gets,
That's the point.
Immature.
Yeah.
Immature, I guess.
So I'm thinking of the college students, because I'm thinking when I was like 21, when I was 19, alcohol was super new. And we're like, wow, what is it like to be drunk? I don't know. Let's figure it out. And then you're puking, and then it's like, whoa, is that what it is? That sucks. And then this other guy is drunk and he's having fun. You're like, why can't I be like that person? Why am I vomiting? Or in that kind of situation. And so, but very quickly for some people, they realize this is not a good value, right? Like alcohol, we could, it's a poison. It's not like a nutritional benefit to the body. Right, your liver and kidneys have to filter it out, and then you can get pancreatitis. Super not good. So knowing what our values are is fundamental, and making sure that they're sound. And the only way to develop that is through self-reflection and some application of critical thinking, which means that I'm observing first. I'm like, I see the thing. But then I have some evaluation mechanism. I can like.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, introduce.
I think I mentioned it before, and like I'm speaking from my perspective, like my personal experience. Visualizing and wanting and planning all these things are super important, but it's kind of worthless if you are self-sabotaging yourself without knowing or really knowing. Because you undo it. You undo the efforts. Like, for example, like you go to the gym twice a week and then 3 times a week. Oh,
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, brother.
Hi.
Sorry, it was Ash.
Ash.
Very good.
See you again. Happy New Year, my friend. Happy New Year. Please do. Hi. Happy New Year. Nice to meet you.
Lola. Dimitri.
Sorry, I'm late.
It's okay. I'm happy you're here. So we're talking about just a quick summary, and then we'll go back to this point. Okay. New Year's resolutions or annual, which is a long time to wait to have a resolution.
Right.
So is there some way that we could have resolutions faster, like every day, right? Like we can grow and change every day. And so we discussed some stuff, and Lola's brought up, well, I can have these plans. I can be putting effort in, but then even if I'm aware, there may be situations where I self-sabotage. Like when there's a huge sand dune and I go up the sand dune and then I go back, right? And so that's where we're at right now.
Like you could be doing all of these things, and like for example, you keep surrounding yourself with toxic people, or it might be, you know, your relationships, could be friendships, could be family, you know, God forbid, but like those things can sabotage your progress, and if you keep letting, like for example, you might be working out a lot, but you're eating like, you know, you're not eating well. It's, you might be putting in so much effort and see no results. So I think it's little by little, obviously, is key, but you also have to make sure you're starting at either zero or like, you know, positive, rather than being like, okay, well, you know, I worked out, so let me just, you know, go to McDonald's. Even though like you haven't even lost any weight, you're literally like, immediately I need to give myself a reward. Like, there you go, you just balanced it out, and now you're at the beginning, but you think you did your head, right? So I think that's what matters as well. You like, you're building without subtracting. Like obviously things happen, but you know, you can't just be rewarding yourself immediately for one good habit, like one good thing, especially if that reward isn't even a good reward.
There you go. That was good.
Right?
Yeah. So can I comment?
Yeah.
Okay, so I feel that defining what the reward is. So earlier we talked about the difference between saying I'm going to diet as a goal or a value, or nutrition as a goal or a value.
Yeah.
Right? And nutrition is in some ways more of a positive attitude, because I'm going to reward myself. Today I reward myself with red pepper and hummus. Right?
That's delicious.
Right? That was a reward.
Yeah.
See? Whereas if I say I'm going to diet, I'm not going to allow myself to eat this thing, that's in some ways a punishment, or I'm trying to eliminate the desire of the thing. This topic's for her kind of, so. Part of what we want to do is observe, right? Understand our patterns. So again, we go back to the Socratic principle, know thyself. And really, like, what does that mean? I would go back to Nietzsche's eternal recurrence and say that Nietzsche says a demon comes to you in the night and says, if you had to live the same life over and over again for eternity, as soon as you die, you're reborn again, the same life. What is your disposition towards that circumstance? If you don't affirm it, if you can't say, yes, I will take every moment of the good and the bad, then it's in some ways an existential, like, I want to say analysis, but it's a claim to myself that there's something wrong with the way I'm living my life. With the reason that an unreflected life is not worth living, like in Plato's Apology. The reason Socrates says that is because if I make the same mistakes over and over again, is that a good life? If I don't see the shit that I'm doing, then really what's going on is I'm just repeating these mistakes, and I'm just engaged in endless suffering in some ways, right? And is that good? Like, what are my efforts towards? Through reflection, and we can talk about, well, where's the place of this? How do we do it, right? And I think there's something we can say about that. How do I incorporate this into my life in a healthy way, right? That maximizes the benefit for me or those that I'm engaged with. If I find an appropriate place for reflection, like some form of practical wisdom, like the median or the mean, or how to moderate it, then I can be aware of my trajectory, and I can see those self-defeating patterns. And I can say, okay, I've observed that in these circumstances, I engage in this habit. This habit's not good for me, right? And I'm going to need to have time. So let's say there's 7 instances of me doing the bad habit. I'm going to have 7 instances of reflection. Maybe 1 where I can look back, but let's just assume the memory kind of sucks. It would be more efficient, let's say more effective, for me to observe them each instance, like, oh, this happened. It might only take a second. Ooh, that happened. Like just a moment of awareness. You're like, oh, I fucked that up, right? Whatever that might be, right? And when I'm aware of it, then what I can do is I can understand, I have more access to seeing the patterns that underlie why I'm acting the way I am. And then I can understand, from that point, once I understand the nature of the pattern, right? Then I have a bit more control over myself and the cosmos to navigate, so I know where to put my effort. If again, when you say you only have so much time, you only have so much resources, only have so much energy, where are you going to direct it? You're not just going to shoot the gun in any direction. You need to feed the tribe and your family. You need to make sure you kill the deer. If you only had one bullet, there's some people in our history that had one bullet. There's some, let's call them men for now. There's some people though, right? I shouldn't just say that. I'm sorry. There's some people, I associate men with hunters. I think that's wrong. But there's some people that had one bullet. Of that group, some of them successfully killed the animal and they were able to bring it back, and then they lived. And then they continued. Maybe not one bullet, but maybe one arrow. And then some people had one and then they missed. Or they shot at the wrong thing, right? There was some figment there, a mirage, and it didn't actually exist. And then they didn't survive, right? So where we put our effort is super important. Okay, coming back to what you said.
Okay.
Went around, back to that. So if we're aware of ourselves, right, through reflecting, thinking back what happened, right? I can be in the moment. I call it awareness is like in the moment, but reflection is like what happened. I'm looking back, right? It's like the mirror is looking in the past, okay? If I can reflect on what's occurred and the patterns of my behavior, then I can say, this takes some honesty too with ourselves, which is almost like a skill, right? I can say, okay, I've defeated myself, or I've engaged in self-sabotaging here. Is there some similarity or affinity between these things? Like smoking cigarettes. Lots of people smoke cigarettes, right? It's an addiction. It's like I don't have control. I can't say no, whatever it might be. And so is there some commonality that engages me to smoke the cigarette or other self-defeating behavior, whatever it might be, right? And when I understand what those common principles are, like I said earlier, what is the thing that's initiating the desire for the thing, right? If like I said, I was at that workplace, and sometimes I wouldn't eat breakfast, and then I would work for. Hello.
Thank you, brother.
Second deal?
Oh, yeah, no worries. So,
Yeah, I had this as like, it's a lot. And I feel it's immoral for me to put too much sugar in my mouth because I was at the dentist today. And the dentist is like,
yeah.
giving me shit. It's like, Achilles, you're fucking up here, or you fucked up in the past. When I like first started smoking marijuana in my early 20s.
Talking about putting away bad habits, right?
Right? Exactly.
It's hypocritical.
Yeah. So I just like, to be vulnerable, I love candy. At least I did a lot. Like sour candy, like those chewy ones. And I fucking like, I got a bunch of OSAP money. And so me and my friends were all high. And we went, this is fun to stay in the video. And then we went to it's like an intermission. I went to the corner store, the gas station. And like this, I remember the day that like it screwed my tooth. Literally bought like $60 of junk food.
Damn.
And then we were super high.
Back in the day too, that's like $200 right now, minimum.
And I just like ate all the candy, and this is an example of what not to do. And then like intoxication on marijuana, like so high that after you binge eat all this candy, you just pass out, meaning that you have all this sugar and like gummy stuff in your teeth.
That's why you brush your teeth really fast.
Yeah.
Okay, there's some wisdom there. There you go. Where were you when I was 21?
You're supposed to balance it out. Get some good habits with your bad habits.
Yeah.
You seal the deal.
So that led to negative consequences that are still affecting me today. Yes. So, okay. So self-defeating behavior, right? You can take the position, a deterministic perspective that there's not in my control. There's nothing I can do. Why do I even try? Right? Mm-hmm. Or we can maybe falsify the belief that you do have control. that there's something inside of you, let's call it agency or volition. You can say free will if you want, where you, and psychologically the executive function, you do have control to make decisions and to be aware of what's going on. It's just that, like, what is it though? Like, what am I doing? Like, how am I not, this is a good quote, how am I not myself? You know? How am I not
Like,
myself?
who is itself? Like, am I the
Or
same
you
self?
betray your little self.
It's one of the movies for the Philosophy Society. It's called I Heart Huckabees. It's an existentialist film,
Nice.
and it's super good. So it's on the list of the films we're supposed to watch.
Where is this list? Is it on your blog?
Yeah, I think so. When you say how am I not myself, did we talk about this before? I think so. Briefly. I'm always myself, aren't I not? I am always Achilles. When am I not Achilles? Like, when am I you? It's not like the soul comes out and says, shit, I can be Trace Bins for a little bit. She didn't like that one.
No. Wait, viewers swear. No, just kidding.
You know what I mean? Like, it just crawls out of you. Like, the homunculus escapes you, right? Like in the movie Men in Black, there's this one alien that's inside of a human mechanoid system. And it's this little small alien guy inside the head of the human, right? And it's like moving it around. That alien could get out of that guy and go into another guy and then walk him around, right? But that's not the way it is for us. You know, yourself is a combination of your physical body that is changing and changes, and your personality and your identity. And there's different ways that we express who and what we are. There's different expressions of self. And some of them you might be like, I don't like this. Like, I didn't like that binge eating candy guy. And I really try not to go to the corner store to this day. But sometimes I do. Go ahead.
So can you say that we are, like, our identity is formed by our habits? Like, we are our habits, technically.
You sound like Atomic Habits.
Really?
A little
I
bit.
want to say
I
something
didn't
about.
remember reading that there, but
Should be. It'll be your own book.
Well, Aristotle talks about like habits and character in some ways. Stephen Covey misquotes him.
his character is a better way instead of identity.
Yeah, because character is something that's in your control and something that you're doing. And so you can choose your character. You can choose the kind of person you become. There are some parts of ourself and our identity that we don't have a choice over. Like my grandfather was Italian. I can't change that, right? That's not in my control. I was born in Thunder Bay. Can't change
Seems like
that.
you want to change it.
No, he was great. I'm just giving an example, right? There's some things that we can't change. That goes back to the serenity wisdom, right? Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to talk about what you said, that let's say that all these things are in our control. So that has some consequences because thank you so much. So when we convince ourselves that things that are not actually in our control are in our control, and we fail at changing those circumstances, it can have severe effect on our self-esteem, on our self, you know, and we can have a lot of bad behaviors, you know. So I think there should be a balance between accepting the factors that are not in our control and the things that we do have something to do about. Another thing that I was thinking about was about that progress thing that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, especially nowadays, you know, in the past 20 years, we've had a very mechanical look at human life and the concept of progress in one's life.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has taken away the concept of peace and being in center.
I was just talking about that.
Yeah?
Yeah, because it was like, I'm like, we're always constantly on the go. Like, if relaxing in North America is like, you know, it's like you're giving up. But
You need to move forward. You
Yeah.
know? And I'm not talking about being complacent and just not moving forward at all, but this obsession with moving forward and, progress, whatever we define it in our lives, this has taken away so much peace, and it has taken away so much energy that we otherwise would have invested in our friendships, in our social groups, things like that. And those things brought us a lot of other things in our life, like peace, like happiness, like many other things. But nowadays, more and more societies, not just the Western societies, even in other parts of the world, you see that people are so much invested in themselves that they just don't look around anymore.
Yeah.
I was thinking the other night about, I was watching that show Silo, and there was this guy who was looking
Sorry,
at
what show?
Silo. It's on Apple TV Plus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
So in this show, there's this guy who looks at the monitor and recognizes the stars. I was thinking to myself, all these people in the past, and I'm not talking about the astronomers today who go onto universities and stuff. Those people in the past who recognize those patterns in the sky, that person must have been a special person who just got away from the everyday things that they did, looked up and saw, wow, those things have a pattern.
That's cool.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but when we are consumed with ourselves and the progress of ourselves, those moments never happen.
Sure.
Right? We never look out. We're just looking inward. We should look inward too, but I think there should be a balance,
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so just directly on that, like there's appreciating our experience, whether it's inward or outward, but then there's like capitalistic focus on the goal and productivity, and using the self as a means to an end instead of an end in itself. So it's like you either work to live or live to work.
Exactly.
Right? Or your life is passing you by. Are you appreciating what's going on today? Or are you worried about all of this shit? Right?
Yeah.
And so
Also, concerningly, we're all so obsessed with ourselves. We're going to be all doing the exact same thing. Like, if you think about it, everybody has the exact same resolution. Nobody's going to think outside the box because we're all isolating ourselves. And also, it benefits consumerism entirely because you are, no matter how much you do, you'll never be satisfied because you lack community. You lack unity, you lack acceptance. No matter how much you love yourself, great, like you love yourself, that's important. Absolutely, I'm not saying you don't have, obviously you have to love yourself, but we all long for something more as well, right? Like nobody wants to be like, yeah, like I'm sure people are fine living by themselves, but we all want like a partner or a community or friends. And I feel like we've just been isolating ourselves to the point where everyone is just so self-obsessed and so self-absorbed that we don't even help people anymore. Like it's always me, and it's getting to the point where finding a genuine connection is getting harder and harder to do because you're like, well, this person wants me to like help them. It's like they're toxic because I need to be using my own resources to become better. In what way? We don't know. But it's like people are thinking that if they're helping others, they're not helping themselves. And some people don't even want to help other people because they're like, oh, well, they're going to be ahead of me now.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I understand there's some people who use other people. They're not going to help lift you up when, you've lifted them up. But I feel like everybody's counting scores to the point where it's just self-isolating. And now we want to feel better about ourselves by constant improvement that's going nowhere.
yeah, it's like this, there's a competitive element that takes away from the community of our society.
Because if we're competing, how are we supposed to be united? You know what I'm saying?
And happy. And another thing you said about consumerism, this concept of progress is actually, as you said, is actually constant unhappiness because you're always waiting for the one that is ahead. You know, you're never happy with the one that you have, you know. And one other thing that I was thinking about, have you seen the movie Radio Days by Woody Allen? Or, you know, the old movies in the 90s?
What is it about? Because I've seen Woody Allen films, but I'm not sure if I've seen that.
This one is pretty famous. It's about actually the family of Woody Allen back in the days, like maybe in the 20s, where the jobs were scarce. Many people in the family in New York
Great
City.
Depression?
Yeah, during the Great Depression, they were unemployed and they were all living in one house or two houses in one neighborhood. And the thing that I was thinking about is that those days where, you know, society was not that wealthy, there was a scarcity of jobs and things like that, most people were under the financial hardships. Right, severely, not just like I don't have money to pay for my Netflix, you know, like I don't have the rent, you know, things like that. Yes, real problems.
They cook up for potatoes.
Yeah. So you see that family, for example, there's an uncle who is just obsessed with the news on the radio. There's another grandma who's obsessed with knitting, things like that. And people with all those flaws are accepted in the community as they are. Nobody picks on them. Why don't you go to the gym from next Saturday? Why don't you, I don't know, take another course? Why don't you, I don't know, things like that. If they were, I don't know, if they had bad habits, they were reminded sometimes in the past, but they weren't. They were accepted to a great extent, right? All their fault, because the idea was we are all humans and humans have faults, you know, have mistakes, and we didn't make a big deal out of it, right? Because all of us is part of being human. But I think nowadays we are promoting this idea of perfection, the perfect human. Perfect human has to have the body of Arnold Schwarzenegger, has to have the mind of Einstein, has to have the education of Obama, or all these things all at once. I mean, if you have a single flaw, nope, you need to improve. Go back in the line.
Is it evolution? Is it the online? Is it because we have so much information? Is it because we're comparing ourselves on social media?
It's part of it.
Yeah.
Lack of balance is what I believe, because the competition is good, the self-improvement is good, but sometimes we overindulge in it, or we just have the horse blinders on, like that's all I'm going to do, instead of bringing that balance within life, where it's like have a social aspect as well, have a personal reflection to find your inner peace, to work on your hobbies, work, self-improvement in whatever area you want. It's just I have a hard time balancing things out.
I think there's a bigger social, now that I've said it, I think there's a bigger social thing. Like, think about it back before Facebook. Facebook made it worse. Instagram made it even worse. Before Facebook, you had that one smart kid in your high school, and you know, like whatever, like he goes into university. Then you go into university, there's a bunch of other smart kids, and there's like that one smart kid, and then that's all you compare yourself to. You know, like maybe like a few 5 smart kids, and you're like, oh, okay, like you kind of like compare yourself to them once in a while, but that's it. It's just those 5 people. Maybe you have an idol and you look up to him. Let's just say 20. Now we compare ourselves to how many people a day?
Not just people, we are comparing ourselves with data.
Oh God!
Right.
Yeah, I forgot.
Right?
AI.
What is my rank in the university? This is important, you know? Back then, when I was a kid, nobody cared about the rank in the school. You know, who cares you?
Yay!
Yeah, at least you didn't fail.
Yeah.
Right? But nowadays, am I the first person in the university to or not? There are like 1,000 people in the university. What are the odds of you being the first? And what does that even mean? Because there could be all 1,000 smart people, all knowledgeable, just for very, very small differences. One of them is the first and the other one is the last.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't mean anything, but it is people are beating themselves up for those ranks and those, you know, comparing yourself. What do you I want to add something that what you were talking about. You said that look at the bad habits. So what I think is that we could add this to that, and that is, I said that a lot. Yeah, and that is, that progress could be having more inner peace.
Yeah,
It could
exactly.
be, right? It could be like not comparing ourselves with with other people that much, right? It could be not obsessing over something. It could be being more forgiving towards ourselves and our mistakes. Yeah.
Like the Dalai Lama, aside from certain recent issues of the Dalai Lama's behavior, in his book, A Guide to Happiness, something like that, it identifies the factor of gratitude, right? And how when we focus on what we appreciate instead of what we don't have, it increases our well-being and our happiness, right? So I think what you're talking about, the inner peace thing, is similar to Dimitri's point about balance. And the perfectionism point is on one end of the spectrum. Like there's an over-reliance on growth and this focus on like being perfect and this ideal human. And I understand that. And that can be a problem for a lot of people, right? Like body dysmorphic disorder, we don't want that. That's not good. On the other end of the spectrum, it's just like being passive and not growing, being stagnant. And I think that there's a balance for us in our lives. And when we look at meaning in life,
Oh my God, sorry.
Okay. Well, thank you.
there's 3 properties that psychologists, at least from research I did, identified for meaning in life. What are they? Give me one.
That you did for your life?
How do we get meaning in life? Because I know I've said to you before.
Here in philosophy? I don't know.
I feel like it's a test.
How to find meaning, purpose.
Well, that's one. He's got one. There you go. That's all I asked. Good job. Purpose is a future-oriented goal. That's how they define it. The second one would be significance, right? That goal is something that is beyond ourselves. So it's like a doctor that's doing cancer research because maybe their sibling died when they were younger of cancer and it really affected them. So them devoting their life to the goal of cancer research, it's bigger than they could ever do personally, right? So all of their effort is meaningful. If I have the goal of moving the mouse, it's over. It's not significant, right? So its meaning is reduced. The final property is coherence. That not only does my identity fit together, it fits together with the goal, right? So when we talk about trauma, like fucking something happened, right? And it was bad. It was out of our control, or maybe it was in our control, but it's if our identity's like here, it's like out here. Like I did not want that to occur. Like there's been some things.
So are values and principles identity-based or character-based? Since they change over time.
So identity is a larger category, characters inside of it.
So that's like a subcategory.
Yeah. Because identity, there are things that are a part of our identity that are not in our control.
Like name, race.
Yeah, we can change your name, but like ethnicity.
Ethnicity.
Yeah.
So you change that too, actually.
I guess. But yeah. Character, if we define character as habits over time and how you develop yourself, that's a different thing. With a reference to Aristotle. Our identities are important. And what's in our control for this is our narrative, the story that connects all this together, how I'm perceiving and interpreting my experience. And the book that this fine young lady got today, it was a prize for the Philosophy Society, and we actually have 2. Da, da, da.
Surprise?
Yes, it's a prize.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
I'm going to sign it. I'm going to write something for you before you go. I do that for everybody. I give this book to. I've given this book.
You didn't have to say that.
What?
Special. You never write anything for anybody.
Okay. I don't know what to
It's
say.
the book that you were talking about last week. Feeling good by
Yeah. It's true. Okay, the coherence property is something that we're going to bring together, right, in our narrative. So when experiences occur, that's part of growth. and becoming like an adult in some ways. Like when you're a kid, there's a whole bunch of shit ahead of you that's not in your control that you have to process and integrate into who you are, right? And how we tell ourselves that story is fundamental to being like mentally healthy, right? So that perfectionism thing, and Burns goes into this, is an unrealistic goal that we really can never attain. And in the book, he's like, perfection doesn't exist in this universe. It's not something that you're ever going to find or experience. Like, depending on what you mean by perfection, if you like have a partner and you're in love and you're like, you're perfect, like that's a different thing. But you could say that you never actually see a circle, because when you observe something, they'll see imperfections in what appears to be a circle, and it really isn't a circle. And a circle, by definition, is a two-dimensional figure, and those don't exist in our experience, actually. So, anyways, aside from the philosophical rate,
Some guy told me, he's like, everyone's like, oh, practice makes perfect, or it doesn't. Practice makes better.
that's good, right? Very good, yeah.
That's a great way to put it, because mostly chasing.
And so going back to earlier when we talked about terms, right? The difference between like things like diet and nutrition, perfection, we can just trade that. Sometimes it's just a cognitive habit. It's just switching out the words so they're not emotionally loaded or have a negative meaning to them. And when we look at page 42, page 42, what page is it? Page 42.
Oh, cognitive
Definitions
storage.
of cognitive.
Oh yeah.
That was fast. That was fast.
He took the course. He's done with the book. So what Burns is doing here is he's identifying 10 ways of thinking that are always errors. And they're similar to logical fallacies, but they're a little bit different because they're tied to our emotions and self-esteem. So even if we're like super awesome and we just don't make these mistakes, we may have people in our lives that make the mistakes, like our mother or our friends or coworkers, whoever. It doesn't matter who it is. And so if we're aware of the error, we can craft a way to resolve it, and we can help ourselves and the people we care about. So that's why reading the book is a good thing.
That's the hard part, is noticing in someone and then trying to redirect them, or like try to like,
Help them out.
give them some insight. Like, you know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? What is that? Leave me alone. You're wrong.
I think one of the reasons is that those two people who are talking to each other are in very, very different emotional states. And when you are, I think many of our, conclusions, our perception is shadowed by how we feel about things or a certain situation. And as a result, when somebody is depressed, you could reason with them all you want. It won't change how they feel that much, So you need to, that's why a therapist would go into different channels to somehow get them out of that maze of feelings, and make them enter into a new emotional state, because the objective life hasn't changed, like sometimes it happens to all of us, right? On a certain day, we feel bad and we feel that our life is not going well, but on another day, with the exact same situation, we feel good and say it's sunny, with everybody's nice, things like that. But the objective factors of our lives haven't changed at all. The only thing is changed is the emotions, And I think that by itself shows that when two people, when one is depressed, the other one is not, are talking to each other, that one who is not depressed should be aware and take it into consideration that the other person is not in this emotional state because he's not aware of the objective reality. It's just he or she is just feeling the way he or she is, and we need to help them to get out of that emotional state.
That's the thing. How do you help them though if they don't want to accept help? Because a lot of times in that state, you don't want to talk to anyone. You don't want to fuck with them. Sorry, you don't want to.
It's okay. You can swear. It's fine.
Okay.
Just don't be hurtful to people. And if you are, we're going to observe that and talk about it.
Okay.
You're gonna be one of the subjects. That's cruel.
Is it though? You can apply that same method to me, so it's not cruel. Because cruelty would be like the intention to cause unnecessary harm or something like that. You know?
Okay.
So if you're being harmed by feedback and criticism, that's a thing in itself.
That can be another meeting.
It's true.
I feel like in that situation, the most important thing you can do is be there for them, just present, and just make sure they feel heard. I don't think there's anything you can do for somebody, like maybe, I don't know, try new experiences or something they wanted to try to get like good feel, like chemicals, but everything else is pretty much up to them. It's their perception.
Yeah.
You cannot change someone's perception of things, no matter how loud you can yell or how many times you say it. So patience and hope.
Well, this book actually teaches us how to do that, right? And
Patience.
so I'm going to read some excerpts from the beginning of the book really quick, just so we have a sense of, because it's new for you guys. So on page 12, this is the 3 principles of CBT that Burns identifies. All of your moods are created. This is on the website. That's a brief summary of feeling good. If you go to practical philosophy, all of your moods are created by cognitions or thoughts. Cognition refers to the way you look at things, your perceptions, mental attitudes, and beliefs. It includes the way you interpret things, what you say about something or someone to yourself. You feel the way you do right now because of the thoughts you are thinking at this moment. That's the first principle. And we can discuss it.
Yeah, sure. So I should mention that CBT is something that was in the progression of psychology, but it's not the last answer to a lot of our questions. And the newest wave of psychology adds some stuff to it. Like, for example, in CBT, they are mostly focused on our cognition and how we think about things and our perception. But in newer waves of psychology, that, for example, that acceptance and therapy is based on, ACT. So in that wave, they add behavior and the environment too. So, like, let's say that humans are like a triangle. At one end, you see cognition. At the other end, you see behavior. And at the third end, you have environment, right? So in the newest wave, they say, whichever one you move, the other one moves accordingly. So if you change the cognition, the behavior could change, and then when the behavior could change, that itself could change the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sometimes you can go from another angle. You could change the environment, and it changes the behavior and then the cognition. And sometimes you can just change the behavior, and the behavior changes the cognition and the environment.
It's reciprocal.
Is there a particular name for that, or sorry?
I've forgotten the main theory that ACT was based on.
Mm-hmm.
I have the book at home.
Yeah, you have. Okay, so I think you can put it on the group, right? Yeah, I've forgotten the name, but I think it adds to a lot of the questions that CBT couldn't answer.
Well, part of it is the acceptance part, right? Like it's in some ways with the mindfulness element that when we're mindful of our experience, we're not being reactive to it, right? And so it's separating ourselves from like an emotional response and just allowing our minds to accept what is going on. And then the commitment would be the behavioral change part, right? And so the Burns stuff is good. Like, so at the beginning of the book, the very beginning, the preface, he talks about a study that was done in the book. And I think it's 70% of people that read the book in 4 weeks are basically cured of depression, which is huge. And it was an independent study that was done. And so, like, when we talk about well-being or the good life, I would say that emotions are a big part of what it means to have eudaimonia or to live a good life. in the sense that if you're just suffering for whatever reason, then you're not, we could say that you're not having a good life. That's not good, right? So I do this as like the very first course within the Philosophy Society, because I want to give like the gift of knowing how to manage our emotions, right? With some tool. The next step is doing mindfulness meditation. And the acceptance commitment therapy, I did this in my clinical psychology class. I bought the text, but I haven't gone into it. So teaching it will come, but it's not now.
I'm going to say something else too, I forgot.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So the other thing is that, I don't know if you know this or not, but depression is actually one of the mysteries of psychology because it has so many paradoxes. You see someone who has a loving family, has the wealth, has the, for example, even fame, things like that. Everybody loves them, but you're still depressed. It's many of the theories of depression that we have, they cannot explain the behavior of many people who are severely depressed. And that's
like clinical depression.
Yeah, clinical depression. And for many of these cases, it doesn't make any sense that
It's
person
even
is.
worse when it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Because it's even more bizarre. Yeah.
So some other scientists propose this idea that for many of those cases, the genetic factor is playing a role. That they have more, I would say, there's a more chance for them to get depressed and have all those hormones and feelings inside of them.
Let me read these other principles, and then we can just add to it, because I want to contest this point, because we brought this up multiple times, and part of my PhD is going to be on this stuff, so it's important to talk about, right? Because why should we even bother reading the book, and do we have any control? You know what I mean? So the second principle, when you're feeling depressed, your thoughts are dominated by a pervasive negativity. You perceive not only yourself, but the entire world in dark, gloomy terms. You'll come to believe that things really are as bad as you imagine them to be. That's the second principle. Third principle, the negative thoughts which cause your emotional turmoil nearly always contain gross distortions. They appear valid, but you will learn that they are irrational or just plain wrong, and that twisted thinking is a major cause of your suffering. Okay, this is like the last one. It is a neurological fact that before you can experience any event, you must process it with your mind and give it meaning. You must understand what is happening to you before you can feel it. So there's like a little diagram or image he has here. There's like a cycle, right? But if something occurs, we have to interpret it before we can be upset about it. Now, we can talk about that. Like an example, like a kid falls, and in one instance, the parents are like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And the kid starts crying, and they embellish the incident. Whereas in the other case, they're like, "You're fine, you're gonna be okay," and the kid's like, "All right, fine," right? It just keeps on going. So in the case of the people that have the perfect life that you could judge by external standards, I would like to falsify the thesis by saying, is it the case that they have any distortions? So for example, are they minimizing, or are they engaging in perfectionistic standards by doing all or nothing thinking, right? And so you would say, well, how are we measuring this? Is it by self-report? Is it when they're in the room with the psychologist? Because they may say things to themselves that they're unaware of, but that are actually affecting their mood. And one other thing is that near the end of the book, he talks about like core beliefs, that there may be things that you believe that are completely false, but you had those beliefs so long ago that you don't even think about it anymore. Your brain, you automatically just go to the negative feeling right away. And so what he says is, I know you want to say something. I'm almost done. He says, first be aware of the emotion, and then ask yourself, what is the thought that is associated with that emotion? And then observe the thought for the distortions. And so it took me like 2 years to go into my mind and rewrite all of these thoughts. But when I did, my depression was gone. And I had like suicide for like a large portion of my life, suicidal thoughts and stuff like that, you know? And now it doesn't ever happen. And if it does happen, I'm like, oh, I know what that is, because I've gotten so good at dealing with, like, wrestling those ideas. What he does, he uses something called the vertical arrow technique, which is really just the Socratic method. All of the stuff in this goes back to Epictetus and Socrates.
I was just talking about the rich kids because it just tied into like goal setting and just having attainable goals. For them, they might not have any small things because they don't have any wants. Like they have everything that they need. It's more of like the one big goal that they're supposed to accomplish is so far away from them, or everything might just seem pointless because it comes so easy. There's no drive.
There's no chase. Right?
Exactly.
And also one more thing on top of that is that, well, some psychologists say that we have 4 kinds of happiness. Okay. One of them is eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is actually the factors that the society believes would make someone happy. Like, for example, being wealthy, having a family, people loving you, things like that.
Okay.
There's desire fulfillment as another kind of happiness. And that is, you set a goal for yourself and you get it. For example, I want to get a car. That's my desire. I can fulfill it by buying it because I have the money, or I can save up, or things like that. There is life satisfaction, that is, you are happy with the overall state of your mind, state of your life.
Like gratitude?
I would kind of like, for example, let's say you are in a poor family, right? But overall, you're happy with things that are going, right? You like, yeah, you like gratitude kind of thinking. And there's another one that is hedonic happiness, which is pleasure. Like, for example, I eat a chocolate and I'm happy for a while, right?
I just say that, hedonic.
Hedonic happiness, yeah.
So temporary.
Yeah, it's temporary. So, in my opinion, the one that is really important in one's life, the ones actually, are life satisfaction and desire fulfillment. These two can give you make you centered and make you give you a peace of mind. And also in that life satisfaction, there is that pleasure concept embedded. You may not be that happy with your life or satisfied with your life if you don't have any pleasure at all. Like, for example, the pleasure of eating a delicious meal, or I don't know, seeing your friend, or whatever, So if you don't have any pleasure in your life, I don't think one would be satisfied with the state of their lives, because what is life without pleasure, really? We're just going forward for now.
Monks do it.
Are they really?
But it is their pleasure to be doing that.
I think they have pleasure. Peace of mind is a kind of pleasure, right? Helping others is pleasure, right? It shouldn't be just chocolate. Like chocolate was just
Yeah, I know what
Having a purpose. It's also having direction. It might seem terrible to us, but obese people are probably complaining about how I'm leaving this food behind right now because they're like, I need 3 of these to feel full.
Yeah, eudaimonia. I think we could talk about all different definitions of that.
I was just quoting some psychologists who make this distinction.
Yeah, like subjective well-being is one way to evaluate that, which can be related to like society standards, and then people will associate with that and want to conform to it. But like Aristotle defines it a little differently, and then I define it like the good life, and then I have properties that I associate with the good life, like the absence of mental illness, right? Or like not having meaningless suffering, for example, or at least
What would you
managing,
consider meaningless suffering?
like taking a hammer and smashing my finger.
Let's not do that.
No.
Meaningless.
That's
I mean, they do that in
some
movies.
people like the pain, so it's a new suffering to them. No, but some people just self-pity. Endless self-pity is technically endless suffering cage of
Which in a masochistic way is giving them pleasure.
I guess, yeah. Silver lining and everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I know what you're saying about like the hedonic treadmill. Like it's the problem of hedonism, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, and that's like the ultimate value. And there are issues with that, like addiction is an example, right? And we talked about that in previous
And
classes.
the more you chase happiness, the less likely you'll get it. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, that goes back to the determinism thing. I think that there are certain things that we can do in life to create happiness. One of them being mindful of cognitive distortions, for example. Like if you're thinking,
But hedonism doesn't include mindfulness. It includes endless pleasure, right? Like that's the point. You're not going to be mindful about your pleasure. You're going to be like, okay, this is great. I want the next thing. You're not. That's the whole point. You're not. It's insatiable.
Yeah.
Right. Insatiable is the opposite of mindfulness. Because if you're mindful, you're not going to be insatiable.
that's why hedonism's a problem.
Yeah. I'm not defending it. I'm saying it is a problem.
Yeah. And then I just think that definition of eudaimonia that the psychologist you're referencing, there may be some, I think it's good to philosophize that. There are some problems with it. Like it's too narrow and the properties it's identifying are contrary to where the term originated from. And it's missing properties of what I would say the good life is. Because the good life is not something relative to a specific culture. And justifications for that would be like, there's conflict between cultures, and we just immediately go into ethical relativism. So there is no standard for the good life then. So
I think there isn't.
okay, we can talk about that.
Yeah. Because you see people who are happy in very, very, very different conditions. Like in some of these, you can see a very small proportion of similarity between the happiness of, for example, a monk and happiness of, I don't know, Donald Trump.
Sure.
Okay, if he's happy.
It's figurative.
No, I mean, because I've seen these people who, for example, I've seen people who were super religious and had a simple life and they seem to be very happy, right? Or others who found happiness in other things, like, for example, in having a very active life, or someone who finds happiness in solitude, like these situations sometimes is so different from each other that you would think that maybe it is relative, and I should find my own happiness, not just look for the standards that people say would make you happy eventually,
Yeah, so like this touches on like how do we define mental illness? Is there a way to define that? Like dysfunction, disproportionality, intensity of the behavior or whatever, context, you know what I mean? And then one thing that I wrote a paper on eudaimonia in my positive psychology class, and we have neural correlates of like eudaimonia, at least in this one paper. It's not published on the website yet, but I can do that sometime soon. And then for morality, because in one sense, like Sam Harris says, if you have like a terrorist who's going to like a Unabomber that's going to blow themselves up like a suicide bomber or whatever, they're going to have a certain neural correlate for their experience of ecstasy as they kill a bunch of people. And if we compare that to like some dude in Western society who's being Santa Claus and giving away a bunch of free stuff, right? There's going to be a difference in the way that their brain is registering the state of happiness. Because one person is connected with people, the other person is like literally killing them and themselves. So even though there's an elation in one area of the brain, there's going to be other areas that are not lit up in the sociopath in this case. And yeah, so I think there is an objective measure. You know what I mean? We can discuss that. I have a chapter on morality. It is called, it's the one where I have the objective moral stuff. Just give me one sec. Got the title for you. I'll post it in the thing. And I think that's important, you know, to basis for a moral education is what I called it. And basically, like, what I'm arguing is there is a way for us to teach people how to be good people. Because Aristotle even disagrees. He's like, if you're not raised in a good family, you're fucked, right? Because the predisposition towards what it means to be good is instilled in you in a very young age. And I'm disagreeing with him. I'm saying, no, there's a way for us to shift it still. And I even give examples of the neural correlates in here. Let's see if I have fMRI pictures. I don't have it in this one, but they do exist. So I think it's important to, you know, I just don't want to give up necessarily and go towards relativism, because then it's just chaos. And so for me, one of the fundamental like assumptions I have is the cosmos, that we live in an ordered universe, meaning that things like fit together. It's not chaos in an indiscriminate way. There was a paper that we looked at by Dean about chaos, and that chaos is necessary in some ways in a universe for entropy and for it to like change. But that definition is different than the way that I think the cosmological approach looks at it.
So you're trying to look at it from a pragmatic perspective.
Yeah, of course. I want to empower people. We're going to be done in like a minute because it's 10. I want to empower people and give them, like, my PhD is going to be on the philosophy of mental health. So I have like another paper I wrote where I did like a capstone for my ethics course on why we have an ethical duty to basically participate in the philosophy society and learn these basic skills like what's taught and feeling good, so we can help other people and ourselves. And then the mental health of society will just increase automatically. And I justify it with like 4 of the 7 ethical principles, you know? And it, when we, to use the philosophy of science, to not just pick one over the other, we can test these theories. We can say, well, let's just see which one really is true by testing it and falsifying it, right? Like, we can still be scientific. We don't just have to accept it based on authority, you know? And like we give the example of people that are depressed, I believe that we should at least try first. First, do a complete analysis of all of your thoughts and see if there's any distortions there. Once you've ruled all that out and all of your thoughts are empowering and you have healthy behaviors, let's look at that sample and study those people, because maybe there is a genetic predisposition. But at the same time, when we bring in epigenetics, the way that you interact and the way that you live changes the expression of your genes. So I don't want to just jump on the deterministic train and give up. You know, I want us to try first and just keep on trying, but not try like the rat who's the hamster that's just, you know, going weird. I want us to be effective with where we choose to focus our attentions. Like when we shoot the deer, we only got one bullet, got one life. What are you going to do with it? And I think it's important that we put it in the right place. That's why, when I was younger, I was taught Qigong or Qi, because my uncle was scared that I was suicidal. He's like, you didn't know what to do. So he taught me this thing. Here's this Qi energy. You can heal yourself with it. And basically, I learned how to meditate out of that. I let go of the belief in Qi, even though I have this subjective experience of what it feels like energy. I know that there's only 4 fundamental forces in the universe, and it's none of them. It's just heat. It's just you're directing heat through your body by slow breathing and stuff like that. It's not this magical essence, because you'd be able to detect it, just like any other form of heat.
In a sense, it's magical.
It feels that way, but I can't like do things with it.
Yeah, well, you're not in the urban.
Right? Okay, that was great.